welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host. I'm a longtime journalist, having worked for ABC News Good Morning America, CNN, CBS News Sunday Morning, even covered the White House for a year during the first Bush administration for public television. I love meeting interesting people and having thought-provoking conversations, and we are in luck, as we are on every episode of A San Francisco Conservative, thanks to our co-host, my co-host, author David Parker, who's joining us from San Francisco. And David is the author of 3 books. The new one is just now available. The first is Income and Wealth. The second is A San Francisco Conservative, the book that gives this series its title. And the newest book is Rome 476. And we've been talking about education. David is a lifelong educator. He wears many other hats as well, sometimes literally. And welcome, David. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. And yeah, we were, again, I know you're concerned, you were a teacher in the public schools there in San Francisco for more than 40 years. And you were telling us recently how you've really seen the decline of academic performance in the classroom and teaching and curriculum and so on. And I just want to kind of continue that conversation forward. I know you also were telling us about Thomas Jefferson's original intention when it comes to public education. What do you think needs to be added to the curriculum in America's public schools?
America was famous at one time for having excellent public schools. People came from countries to come here. And California was an example within the nation. People came to California because the public schools were good. And we reversed that by thinking multiculturally, thinking Howard Zinn, thinking from history from the perspective of the marginalized. And so we've added that to the curriculum at the expense of teaching core subject matter. And we've added the notion of inclusivity and equal outcomes from graduation. And the only way to do that is to reduce the hours of teaching and reduce standards. And that's what we have. California now is 48th or 49th in the nation. And the U.S. Department of Education says 36% of nationwide of students in reading and math are proficient. They won't even say they're doing average work. They say proficient, like D+. The Navy dropped its entrance exam reading level to 4th grade because they couldn't get applicants. That's the level at which American high school students are graduating, can read, 4th grade level.
Very concerning. Not good at all. Not good at all. I know in some of our conversations you've mentioned how prescient, if that's the right word, Aristotle was in writing about the importance of diversity. But it sounds like we can appreciate diversity, but not bring it into the curriculum. So we're teaching about 1,000,001 different things. Is that what you're saying?
America is a pretty diverse population. There's no one ethnic group or race that has a majority anymore. We don't have to talk about that anymore. We should stop talking about it, in fact, and concentrate on the level of instruction. As an educator, 40 years plus 10 years of volunteer, in teaching the same subject all the way through. I know what level I started off with. Exactly, for example, I taught instrumental music. And I knew for a winter concert and for a spring concert, I would have 2 main pieces. And halfway through, it became 1.5. And then pretty soon it became 1 main piece. I was sweating it out, and people told me to stop. You're not getting paid that much money. The kids are not at that level anymore. 1 piece on a program, and I had 2 or 3 students who could play well. I gave them a solo, and I played the piano for them. The concert was lovely, and no one knew that I would drop my standards in half.
Wow.
In half.
Wow. Yeah.
Taught the same material all the way through, well-chosen pieces. So I know I'll testify in a court of law that American education is about half what it should be.
Yeah, wow, that's really concerning indeed. I know you, again, in one of our recent conversations, you spoke about how you brought that quality, as a jazz musician, which you are, one of your many hats, you brought that quality of improvisation into the classroom to really notice what the students were saying and play off of it and so on. And you've also mentioned, I probably mention this every time we talk, but I love how the idea of, people in their 40s, and 50s, coming up to you on the street, thanking you for the impact that you made when they were little girls and boys. And you've also mentioned how, you really had inspired some of the families, again, maybe from immigrant populations, giving them some new ideas, things to think about as they pursue the American dream. With all that in mind, do you have any advice for teachers who are just getting into the profession right now, maybe to make the most of it, and how to really engage those students so that we can turn that trend around? Because it does sound very concerning.
Yeah, instead of giving you repeating again examples of that, I'll give a word of advice to all teachers and remind them, because it's being forgotten in their teacher training, what a teacher's job really is. And that is to inspire students to study, because all learning is self-learning. You have to read the material and think about it and write about it and ask questions. And that's how you learn. You don't learn, the teacher doesn't teach you. You teach yourself. It's a myth. But teachers can inspire students to want to learn. And then a good teacher will facilitate the learning with technique. They see a student's having trouble with understanding something orally, maybe they can find a visual way to portray it, or an oral, anyway, with building blocks, anything that helps a student learn. That's part of teaching. My students, I even got flack for it, were played so much better than other students in other schools, because I was a good teacher. I would give the students what is called in music an etude, a study. So if we're learning a piece, we learn the scale and arpeggio that goes with the piece, and then there'd be an etude, like the most difficult passage, and we would do that slowly. Then when I introduced the piece, when the kids came to that spot, they played right through it. They couldn't believe it. It says, you know the piece from already. And so I had students playing at a very high level by good teaching.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And it sounds like you really, even at that young age, I mean, I'm a father too. And so I know, sometimes it's hard to anticipate, what they're thinking when they're at those young ages, but it sounds like you really paid attention to every student as an individual and noticed the best way to connect with them and inspire them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's good teaching. And the improv aspect of my teaching is I would wait maybe even 30, 60 days for some spontaneous event, for some student to say something that caught everybody's attention. Then I would grab that and make that the focus for the whole year's work. Not the actual academic, but using that example. And that would have their attention.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
my favorite review from a school principal, every year or every 2 years, teachers are evaluated by the principal, and you're supposed to be doing passing work. And I would get always extraordinary on my report card from the principal. But my favorite one, principal says, Mr. Parker, your teaching is a bit unorthodox. I'm not sure what you're doing. It's not what I studied, but I've never been in a class where you can hear a pin drop. The students are so transfixed with your personality and how you teach and how you walk. I'm not saying a thing extraordinary. Go ahead. I'm out of here. So that's my favorite review. So
I love it.
I had their attention.
That's a great compliment. Exactly. I love it. I love it. So I just want to pause for 1 second. For those of you joining us midstream here, this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, lifelong journalist, having worked for ABC News, CBS News, CNN, and so on, and really enjoying the conversations that I'm having with author David Parker, author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco conservative, and his latest book, Room 476. We're talking about one of his many roles. I think of David as a true Renaissance man. One of his roles has been lifelong educator. And I really love that unique approach, and that the principals noticed your unique approach and said, this is impressive and unique. And I sometimes think maybe the antithesis of unique is the teachers' unions. What do you think of the teachers' unions?
I'm a free market person in business and in my writings, but the demands of an employer, the wishes of an employer are not the wishes of the employee. The employee should have that straight. There's a better expression for that. The employer does not have his employees' interests in mind. He just talks like he does because that's how you're supposed to talk. You talk like you care about them. They don't. So it's a natural response by employees to have a union, and they should have a union. Where unions go astray is they ask for higher than market wages or higher than market working conditions, and then insist. And then they start telling the employer, you should be environmentally conscious. Or they tell the school teachers, this is what you should be saying to your students, and you should never hurt their feelings. They start getting involved in the teaching profession, they overstep their bounds. So the teachers union is famous for overstepping its bound. The new version of American history is whatever Howard Zinn says. What do the marginalized people think? That's what American history should be all of. That's what we should be teaching, and that's what we are teaching in public schools. Kids grow up knowing who Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo are. They know who Zapata is. They know who Mao Zedong is. They know who Lenin is. They know who Fidel Castro is. And they don't know who Columbus is. And they don't know who the founding fathers are. And Thomas Jefferson, they can't get around it. So there's one sentence in the book. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and he had slaves. That's the end of Thomas Jefferson. They go on.
In the same sentence.
It's totally wrong.
Yeah.
It's totally wrong.
I'd like to pick up on that, if I may. Again, I guess you just answered the question, but I was going to ask you if you think the schools, public education has gone too far in criticizing our founding fathers. I mean, they're taking the names off of schools and taking down some monuments and so on. Some of my relatives are from the South, from Louisiana, so I don't know if they're still intent on, appreciating the Confederacy or what have you, but I can understand, being sensitive to not really offending anybody. But I think there's the possibility that you can take that too far. And when you start criticizing Thomas Jefferson, I think we've kind of lost it. I don't know.
And you've lost it because he's considered one of the world's geniuses. He just didn't do a couple of things. Frederick Douglass in the 19th century and Clarence Page in the 20th century, a PBS NewsHour essayist, both black, both said that the founding fathers rose to the occasion. They knew slavery was wrong, and they had slaves, and they knew their own personal shortcomings, and they rose to the occasion. And don't get off that criticizing them for having had slaves. Everybody had slaves. Just forget it. If you're analyzing the Constitution is fine. If you read the Federalist Papers, the arguments for the Constitution, it's fine. Aristotle was asked once, why is it when you look closely at the people you most admire, who you think are almost beyond reproach, you find something really incongruous in their behavior? They did some things in life that they're embarrassed, and you're embarrassed to find out that they did these things. Why is that? He says, they dropped the ball. Everybody drops the ball. Watch professional football. They drop the ball sometimes. And they paid a lot of money not to drop the ball. So you don't be so tough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned, and again in your writing, so many times you mentioned what a unique treasure, precious masterpiece the Constitution is, and I certainly agree with that. Do you think that our current legislators are straying too far from, again, what the founding fathers intended, as you were just describing it?
The beauty of the Constitution is that it's one page long. It's almost nothing. You can go to Washington, D.C., it's on an art easel, a big easel because it's very florid writing. They didn't have typewriters. One page. It will stand the test of time. So our Congress today, they really can't break the Constitution. It just says Congress will pass laws and Congress will be elected. We're not appointing our leaders in this country. Everybody's elected. Even the Supreme Court has to be approved by the Congress. The president just can't throw somebody on there. So they can't go from the Constitution. And when they have, it gets reversed. Dred Scott was reversed. You can't do that. And Roe versus Wade, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that a Supreme Court justice can say that you can have abortion up to 60 days, but not 63 days or not 90 days. Supreme Court justice can't make a decision like that. It's nothing in the Constitution that says that it's legal or illegal. If a state wants to do that or a local community, they can do that, but not the federal government. Can't make a law that you can. That's why it's considered unconstitutional. That's the only reason. The only reason there's nothing in the Constitution that talks about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, speaking of the progressive movement, I mean, some people would say they've really brought about some important positive changes in America. There's gay marriage is legal now. Some people might not like that. But again, it's moving on from the Constitution, universal medical care. And I know you have some strong opinions about that. But do you think that the progressive movement is doing more harm than good in our nation?
It did some good at its origins. If it led to unionization and protection of workers, especially safety on the job and creating of workers' comp insurance for and a 40-hour work week, and if it led to less discrimination in employment and in education, all that is fine. That's not even progressive. That's almost everybody doesn't. No one objects to any of that anyway. Gay marriage, that's a civil right. If two people want to get married, they get married. There's nothing in the Constitution says you can't get married if you feel like it. Nothing says you have to be a certain religion or a certain sexual preference to get married. A church might say no, but the federal government has no right to say no. If you want to go to city hall or county hall and get married, you get married. That's your business.
Yeah, I understand.
Healthcare, though, that's not a civil right. That's not something the Constitution guarantees you. That's something the UN Charter might guarantee you, but not the Constitution. It doesn't say nowhere. It says everybody has a right to an education and health care and a pension and a roof over their head and a chicken on Sunday. There's nothing in the Constitution that says something like that. So if you have a right to health insurance, you have a right to somebody's taxes. So somebody's working and paying taxes so you can have health insurance. And one of my big themes is that the middle class pay all taxes. So some poor person is working as a dishwasher and they're grabbing his money and buying you health insurance with it. That's where it's being paid for. And of course, there's not enough money for that. So it's all paid for by borrowing. So no, you don't have a right to health insurance. Go out and buy a policy.
Well, that's an excellent point to end today's conversation on. I think shining that spotlight on what does this really mean, you know, and you do that so beautifully in your books. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And if you'd like to learn more about David and his books and his writing, please go to his website, davidparkeressays.com. You can also find all three of his books for sale: Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476 on Amazon.com. David, do you have any closing words for us?
Well, I like to always remind readers that all the issues that are in front of you at the moment, political issues, economic issues, are not new. Fighting in Ukraine and Israel, that's not new. There's nothing new. How have these issues been handled in the past? Look at Greece, 5th century, or Athens, 5th century BC. Look at Rome, 1st century. Look at the 18th century, Age of Enlightenment. All these issues are right in front of you, addressed with more nuance, with more understanding. Look to history to solve some of today's problems. Don't just look to the news with the journalists are reporting.
Excellent point. Well, thanks again, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.